let's review the stages of clay, and we'll start kind of at its base level, and that is with slip. And slip is watery clay. Basically, it's kind of liquidy clay. You can see that it's gooey and slimy, and we use this for making sure that joints are stuck together without having trapped air pockets. So this gooey stuff is slip. So that would be your first stage of clay. The next stage of clay is plastic, and plastic clay is moldable. See how it squishes just like Play-Doh. And this is the most workable stage of clay. It's plastic, and it's great for turning into slabs, which are flat, or you can roll it into coils, right, for building different things. It's also very impressible. So if I took something that has a texture, the plastic clay will take that impression really well. So that is plastic clay. So we have slip, and then we have plastic. So the next stage, after it starts to dry out, you can see that this is really wet. This is a little drier. The next driest stage is leather hard. Leather hard clay, you can see this is stiff. It's not bending very easily. It kind of taps on the table. So it is partway dry, or about halfway dry, and it is leather hard. This is great if you're trying to build something that has geometric edges, so that you have this shape that's going to hold its form when you attach it to something else. The other is if you were going to say add a engobe or a slip decoration to the outside. It also does really well if you want to incise or carve into it. So half dry is leather hard. So slip, plastic, leather hard. All right, once you go from leather hard, which is actually a very strong stage of clay, the next stage is completely dry. And completely dry is bone dry. You'll notice that it's a much lighter color than it is when it's plastic or leather hard, and it's lightweight. It does not feel cool to the touch. If I touch this, it feels cool, but this one just feels like normal room temperature. And the thing about this is we go from a strong stage with leather hard to an extremely fragile stage in bone dry. Bone dry clay is you are done working with it. All right, if it dries out to bone dry, there's not a whole lot you can do to continue working with it, because if you get it wet, it disintegrates. The other thing is, if you're not careful how you handle it, like if I pick this up too roughly, it's going to break. All right, it's extremely fragile when it is bone dry. If you are creating with an air dry clay, then the bone dry stage is your finished project. So the next steps of clay that we're going to discuss are things like stoneware or earthenware, in which case you need a kiln to fire to extremely high temperatures. But if you're using an air dry clay, then bone dry is your final stage. So the next steps we're going to discuss are ones that would be used with clay that requires firing in a kiln. Right. Once your project becomes bone dry, then you put it in the kiln and fire it. And when it comes out of that first firing, it's bisque. This little guy, you can see, he's a little different color. Clay is different colors when it's fired. This is considered a buff clay, so it's kind of a really light peachy color. And this little guy is bisque. So if I tap him on the table, he's not going to chip and break like it would if I'd used this. All right, so all the moisture has been fired out, and this bisque, which if you kind of think like a biscuit, is something that you've baked and can eat. All right, so if something is baked, it's bisque, and it is ready for glaze. So glaze comes in different colors and textures. This one is a good example of how the second firing, or the glaze firing, changes. That lid is kind of harder to get off than I expected. So it changes it. So this glaze looks pink, and when you put it on, it looks pink. So let me put some on this little guy just so you can see. All right. But when it fires, the heat is the catalyst that causes it to change forms, and it becomes clear in this case. So don't let the color of the liquid glaze fool you, because when you fire it, the heat is going to change it into other colors, right? And after we've fired, we get our finished glazeware. So this is an example of a student project. It's a bowl, and actually it was given to me, so I am using it to hold some office passes on my desk. But you can see that the glaze, just like a glazed donut, the silica in the liquid glaze melted in the kiln, just like sugar in a glazed donut would. On a hot day, if I went and bought donuts and left them in the car, it would melt, right? But if I put them in the fridge, it would harden back up. So the glaze goes onto your pottery, onto your bisque, and is fired, and that silica in there and the various minerals melt and react with the heat, and you end up with this nice, shiny, glassy finish when it's cool. This particular piece is a stoneware piece, so it is microwave oven and dishwasher safe. And you can pretty much use it for whatever you'd like. So if we review those stages of clay, we have slip, plastic, leather hard, bone dry, fire it, it comes out as bisque, glaze it, fire it again, and it comes out with your finished glazeware pottery.